My wife chose to become her sister's gestational carrier without even looking me in the eye to discuss it. She said it was her body and her choice. I warned her that this decision would tear us in two. Now that everything has fallen apart and she is begging me to return, I only offer one cold truth in response. I will not take on a problem that was never mine. My name is Ethan. I am 32 years old, and I work as an operations manager for a medium-sized logistics company in Michigan. It's not the most exciting job in the world, but it's stable, well-paid, and it allowed me to build a decent life for my family. I've been with the company for 8 years. I started loading trucks at 5 a.m. for $8 an hour. Today, I earn around $75,000 a year. I'm not rich, but I live comfortably. And I achieved that professional climb through responsibility and effort. In the warehouse, you quickly learn that one mistake can cost thousands of dollars in delays. You check everything twice, communicate clearly, and own your failures without excuses. Thanks to that, my superiors trusted me, and I climbed the ranks by being someone who was punctual, solved problems, and didn't create new ones. I married Julia 6 years ago. She is now 30. We had 3 children, our eldest daughter, Sophia, 5, and the twins, Adam and Jacob, who just turned 3. Life was simple, stable, and I liked it that way. We moved into a 3-bedroom house built in the 80s, old kitchen, worn carpet, and a bathroom that looked straight out of an old TV episode. But it was our home, and on weekends I dedicated myself to improving it. I ripped out the carpets, installed laminate flooring, renovated the bathroom, and even built a deck in the backyard where we had barbecues in the summer. Julia worked 3 days a week as a dental hygienist at a nearby clinic. Her salary, about $25,000 a year, helped with groceries and utilities. But I covered the heaviest expenses, the mortgage, insurance, and big purchases. Still, we maintained a balance. I handled the car maintenance and the yard. She took care of meals and shopping. Weekends were a mix of soccer practice for Sophia, afternoons at the park with the twins, and the classic chaos of raising 3 small children. One of my favorite moments was always watching Sophia run across the field while the other parents cheered from the sidelines. Afterward, we would go for ice cream and return home exhausted but happy. Adam and Jacob were still far from joining sports, although they ran through the park like little missiles while I tried to keep them in sight. My best friend Marcus has been with me since college. He works in IT for an insurance company, has zero filter, and is brutally honest, something I always appreciated. On Fridays, he used to come over, help me grill hamburgers, and we would hang out while the kids played. When I built the deck, he spent 3 full weekends helping me without asking for anything in return except a couple of beers. Marcus had also gone through his own sentimental disaster. His ex-fiancée emptied their joint account and moved across the country with a man she met online. That blow taught him to protect himself legally and financially, and over time, he ended up giving me a perspective I didn't know I would need. Everything began to fall apart last spring when Julia's twin sister, Laura, dropped the news that would change everything. She and her husband, David, had been trying to have children for years. Several rounds of IVF, huge expenses, and no concrete hope. Their doctor finally recommended surrogacy because, although Laura's eggs were viable, her uterus had scarring from previous procedures that made a safe pregnancy impossible. And that's when my wife decided, without consulting me, that she would be the gestational carrier. She didn't consider it. She didn't want to talk about it. She decided. By the time I finally found out, she had already scheduled the initial medical appointments. I remember that day with a clarity that hurts. It was a Thursday in March, and I was exhausted after resolving a shipment that had been tagged with the wrong zip code and ended up in another state. 4 hours on the phone, a furious client, and a huge expense for urgent transport. I walked into the house looking for peace. The children had already eaten and were watching cartoons. Julia was on the sofa with her phone in hand. I poured myself a cold slice of meatloaf. I sat next to her, and she barely looked up. "How was your day?" she asked. I told her about the shipment, the client threatening to cancel the contract, and how tired I was. Then I asked her how hers had been. Instead of answering, she put her phone on the table and looked at me with that mix of nervousness and defiance that only appeared when she was about to drop something she knew I wouldn't like. "There's something I have to tell you," she blurted out. Every time she used that phrase, I knew something complicated was coming. The last time had been to announce, without consulting me, that we were hosting both families for Thanksgiving. "Laura and David asked me to be their surrogate," she said quickly, like tearing off a Band-Aid. "And I said yes. I stayed motionless, the fork suspended in the air. You said yes? To carrying another couple's child? I asked. Technically, it would be their baby Ethan. It would be David's embryo and Laura's egg. I would just carry it during the pregnancy. And before you say anything, I've already started the medical exams. My first appointment was last week. That was the exact moment the crack opened that ended up dividing everything. My mind needed a moment to assimilate what I had just heard. You already started? When were you planning to talk to me about this? I'm talking about it now, she retorted. No, Julia, you are informing me. That's not the same thing. I pushed my plate aside and left it on the coffee table. Suddenly, my appetite was gone. Julia, this is not like changing your hairstyle or buying a pair of shoes. We are talking about something that will last 9 months and affects our entire family, I said, trying to stay calm. It's my body, Ethan. My decision. Laura is my twin sister. She's been devastated for years every time someone announces a pregnancy. I can help her. I can give her what she wants most in life, to have a child. The child of her husband. Are you hearing what you're saying? I asked in disbelief. Her eyes flashed with irritation. There's nothing crazy about it. It's an act of compassion. Something you apparently don't have. Her comment hit me directly. Compassion would have been including me in this decision before taking tests, visiting clinics, and moving forward behind my back, I replied. I knew you would react this way. That's why I waited, she said, raising her voice. You become controlling about everything. I can never decide anything without you questioning it or turning it into an argument. Controlling? For wanting my wife to consult me before getting pregnant with another man? That's a pretty basic standard, Julia, I countered. She sat up, clenching her fists. You're being selfish. Laura is my twin sister. Do you have any idea what it's like to see her break down over and over every time a test comes back negative? To see her cry at every baby shower she attends? She needs my help. And I'm going to give it to her whether you like it or not. And I am your husband. I am the father of your 3 children, I replied. That doesn't mean anything. Of course it means something, she said. But this doesn't change our relationship. I won't be having David's baby in any real sense. I'm just helping them form their family. This is completely independent of our relationship. I stood up too, trying to keep my voice low so the children in the other room wouldn't hear the argument. Do you really think spending 9 months pregnant with David's child, living here, using our health insurance won't affect anything? Are you listening to yourself? Don't exaggerate, she replied dismissively. It's 9 months. Afterwards, I hand the baby over to Laura and David. That's it. Many women do this. Julia, there's nothing else here. You making such a huge decision without consulting me scares me. It shows me you can decide anything without me. What's next? Quitting your job without telling me? Moving to another state? What comes after this? She took her phone from the sofa, clearly determined to end the conversation. Well, it's decided. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. The embryo transfer is scheduled for April 15th. I already signed everything. Next month. How long have you been planning this? About 6 weeks, she answered. Laura and I talked to the clinic since February. David had to contribute his part, his sample. They're preparing me for the transfer. I've been taking hormones to synchronize my cycle with the embryo. David had to contribute his part, I repeated coldly. Excellent. So my wife and her sister's husband have been talking about how to create a baby together for weeks, coordinating medical procedures with his contribution. And I'm finding out now. Perfectly normal. You're twisting it. This is completely medical, she insisted. Everything is done in a lab, if you're interested in that part. It doesn't matter where it's done or how many clinical terms you use. You made a decision that affects our marriage, our children, our finances, and our entire life without involving me. That is betrayal, Julia. Plain and simple betrayal. She headed toward the stairs. I'm going to check on the kids. When you're ready to be supportive instead of hostile, let me know. And she left, leaving me there, wondering how my marriage had exploded in 10 minutes. I heard her upstairs, helping the children get ready for bed with a cheerful, calm voice, as if we hadn't just had a devastating argument, as if nothing had happened. That night, I barely slept. Julia was softly snoring next to me, completely calm, while I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Around 3 a.m., I got up and went to sit in the dark living room, trying to understand what was happening. My wife was going to carry her brother-in-law's child in her womb. She had signed documents, started treatments, and made monumental decisions without me, and she couldn't grasp why I was upset. The next morning, I called Marcus from the car before going into the office. "I need to talk to you. Are you free for lunch?" "Yeah. What's wrong? You sound terrible." "Julia is going to be the surrogate for Laura and David." There was a long silence on the other end. "Repeat that." "You heard right. The medical process has already started. She told me last night as if she was announcing we were having pasta for dinner." "Brother, I don't even know how to react to that," he finally said. "She decided everything without you? Signed papers, took exams, scheduled procedures without including you?" We had lunch at a small place near my work, where they already knew my usual order. I told him every detail while he listened, his brow furrowing deeper and deeper. "Let me get this straight," he said, putting his sandwich down. "Your wife is going to get pregnant by David. She's going to live this pregnancy in your house in front of your kids. And she decided everything without consulting you. She didn't even have a conversation with you beforehand." "Exactly," I nodded. "And when I brought it up, she told me it's her body, her choice, that I'm selfish, that I'm controlling for wanting to be part of decisions that affect our entire life." Marcus shook his head, incredulous. "This goes far beyond surrogacy. People who do that do it as a couple, with agreements, with dialogue, with transparency. Here she acted as if you didn't exist, as if your opinion was irrelevant." I felt exactly that, the uncomfortable and humiliating sensation of becoming a secondary piece in my own marriage, like a piece of furniture that just gets in the way, or is moved around according to what suits her. I was not a partner. I was not an equal. I was an obstacle. That idea reverberated in my head for hours, to the point that I ended up sitting in the dark living room, wondering where my life was headed. All night, I repeated the same question over and over. What am I going to do now? I didn't have a definitive answer, but I did have a clear premonition. Accepting this situation without saying anything amounted to giving up my own voice, and I wasn't going to allow that. In short, Julia made it clear to me that in our relationship, my opinion carried so little weight that it didn't even deserve to be heard. One day, while talking to Marcus, he stopped me with a seriousness I had rarely seen in him. "You need to protect yourself legally, brother. If she's already made such a big decision without telling you, imagine what else she might be capable of. What if she's signing financial documents with your name? What if the surrogacy involves debts you don't even know about? She could compromise you for years without you finding out until it's too late." His warning struck me harder than I expected. He was right. If Julia had crossed such a clear boundary, how many more would she be willing to cross without thinking twice? That doubt accompanied me for days, making me observe every detail of her behavior with a mixture of disbelief and sadness. The following weeks became a very tense period. Julia began the hormone injections necessary for the embryo transfer process. She did it with a naturalness that disconcerted me. She left the syringes on the sink, the uncapped vials, the boxes piled up next to the mirror, as if she were undergoing a routine treatment without major consequences. Any outsider would have thought she was preparing for a trip, not for a process that could change our lives forever. It wasn't just the injections. She would come home, and I would find her watching videos about surrogacy experiences, reading testimonies from women who had gone through similar treatments, or planning conversations with Laura about possible pregnancy symptoms and calculating estimated due dates. Her enthusiasm contrasted brutally with my anguish. I tried, truly tried, to talk to her on several occasions. Every conversation ended the same way. Me trying to make her reflect, and her accusing me of being controlling, selfish, or insensitive. In one particularly intense argument, I told her, "Julia, please, just stop for a second and think about what this is doing to our relationship. It's breaking us." She didn't even flinch. "What this reveals is who you really are," she replied coldly. "Laura needs help, real help, and I can give it to her. But you are so focused on yourself that you can't see anything else. It's not about me. It's about us being married and you making enormous decisions without telling me. I'm not going to discuss this any further. The transfer is next week. Either you support me or you don't, but I've already decided. Laura is counting on me, and I'm not going to fail her because you can't handle 9 months of pregnancy. I took a deep breath, feeling the helplessness burn inside me. It's not the pregnancy, I replied. It's the betrayal. You are choosing your sister over your husband. Her laugh was dry, almost mocking. Don't be ridiculous. I'm helping my family. If you don't understand that, it's your problem. That's when I knew. I had reached the breaking point. The woman I married was no longer someone I could trust. That same night, I made a final decision. I had to seek legal support. That's how I found Andrea King, a lawyer recommended by a colleague who had gone through a complicated divorce 2 years prior. Her office, located in a professional building downtown, conveyed serenity. Tidy, sober, and without excessive adornments. Nothing in that space tried to impress. It was designed to convey control. Andrea listened carefully to every detail. She didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, she clasped her hands and asked me, "Does your wife work?" "She has a part-time job as a dental hygienist," I replied. "She earns about $25,000 a year. I cover practically everything else: the mortgage, utilities, car insurance, the essentials." Then I mentioned my concern about the treatment costs. "I assume she's using marital money for this," I said. "I have no idea how much she has spent because she won't tell me, but it must be thousands. Fertility clinics aren't exactly cheap." Andrea took more notes. "There's a possibility that she signed contracts or financial commitments in your name." "She shouldn't have, but honestly, I'm not sure of anything anymore. She has access to our accounts. She knows my passwords. She could have signed anything, and I wouldn't know until a bill showed up." Andrea looked up, very seriously. "You need to investigate that as soon as possible. If she forged your signature on a legal document, we're talking about fraud, and not minor fraud. Those types of actions can significantly influence a divorce proceeding." A part of me still wanted to believe we wouldn't reach that point, but the logic was unavoidable. "Do you really think this will end in divorce?" She put down her pen and looked directly at me. "I'll tell you with absolute frankness. Your wife made a decision that changes the structure of your marriage without including you. She disregards your objections and acts as if you are irrelevant. In 20 years practicing family law, I have seen this scenario many times, and it doesn't get better. It escalates." That night, while Julia was at Laura's house organizing ridiculously anticipated details like colors for the future baby's room or ideas for a potential baby shower, I set out to review all our documents. What I found chilled me to the bone. In a drawer of her desk, underneath old bank statements and medical results, was the complete surrogacy contract. It took me only a few minutes to reach the signature page. And there was Julia's signature next to a supposed signature of mine. At first glance, it looked similar, but upon closer inspection, it was evident that I had not written it. The slant was not the same. The form of the initial letter was incorrect, and the curvature of some letters was completely off. It was a forgery. My heart began to pound. Not only had she made decisions without me, but she had committed a crime to validate them. I photographed everything. Every page, every signature, every detail. Then I sent the images to Andrea, accompanied by a short but clear message. I found the proof. I straightened and stored everything as it was. Julia couldn't know that I had discovered it. The next morning, Andrea called me as soon as her office opened. "This is pure fraud," she told me. "The forgery of your signature on a financial and medical contract is extremely serious. Combined with her unilateral decisions and her intent to ignore your opinion, you have a solid, very solid case." "And what do I do now?" "From this moment on," she replied, "document absolutely everything. Every conversation, every expense, every appointment, every medication. If recording requires only one-party consent in your state, record everything. Keep an exhaustive, detailed, and organized record. This will be crucial." And so I did, because I understood that I was no longer fighting to save a marriage. I was defending my stability, my future, and above all, my dignity. I began to understand that the more I gathered evidence that Julia acted on her own and used marital money without informing me, the stronger my legal position would be. Following the advice of the lawyer, Andrea King, I set out to document everything. Every conversation, every argument, every suspicious movement. I kept a notebook where I jotted down dates, times, and a summary of what had been said. I checked our credit card movements daily, recording every expense related to fertility treatments and medications. I also created a folder on my computer organized with screenshots of the forged contract, bank statements, text messages, and any evidence where Julia dismissed my objections. The embryo transfer procedure went smoothly on Thursday, April 15th, just as she had planned without consulting me. That afternoon, she returned home radiant, with an enthusiasm that almost seemed overwhelming. She had taken the day off work and spent the entire day at the clinic accompanied by Laura and David. As soon as she crossed the door, she gathered the children in the living room and, with a cheerful tone, announced that Aunt Laura's baby would be growing in Mommy's tummy for a while. Our eldest daughter, Sophia 5, frowned, trying to understand. "Why?" she asked. "Because Aunt Laura's tummy doesn't work well, so Mommy is helping her. Isn't that nice?" Sophia nodded without giving it much importance and went back to building towers with her colored blocks. The twins, still very small, only caught their mother's happiness. They clapped a couple of times and went back to their trucks. I watched the scene from the kitchen doorway, unable to feel anything. The affection I once had for Julia had dissipated the day I discovered the forged signature. She had crossed an essential line, one from which there was no return. Not only had she committed fraud, she had trampled on my trust and was now showcasing the result in front of our children. 2 weeks later, Julia took a pregnancy test. Positive. She told me with an anxious smile, as if expecting me to react with joy. It was Saturday morning. The children were watching cartoons in the living room. She pulled a digital test out of her pocket, one of those that shows the word pregnant on the screen, and held it up like a trophy. "It worked. I'm pregnant," she announced. "Good for you," I replied without emotion. Her smile instantly faded. "Is that all you're going to say?" "What do you want me to say, Julia?" "Congratulations on getting pregnant by your brother-in-law after forging my signature on legal documents?" Her face lost all color. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my cell phone, opened the photos, and showed her the image of the contract with both signatures, mine real and the forged one. "This signature, the one that is not mine, the one that commits me to a surrogacy agreement without my consent, is a crime, Julia, actual fraud. Ethan, I can explain." "You don't need to. I already spoke with my lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." She grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "You can't be serious. Because of this?" "Because of this and everything else. Constant lies, giant decisions without consulting me, forgery of legal documents, fraud. Yes, I am completely serious." "But I'm pregnant. You can't leave me now." "What kind of person abandons his pregnant wife?" I pulled my arm out of her grip. "It's not my baby, so it's not my responsibility. And you made it clear you didn't want my opinion when you decided to do this alone." She began to cry. Dramatic tears of the kind that might have affected me a month ago, but now stirred absolutely nothing. "Please, Ethan, don't do this. I made a mistake. I know. I should have told you sooner. I should have included you more, but I'm trying to fix it. We can get over this." "No, we can't. Betrayal and fraud aren't fixed with late apologies. They are avoided by not doing them. So that's it? 6 years of marriage, 3 children, and you're throwing it away because I wanted to help my sister?" The person who ended it is the one who betrayed her partner, the one who proved that my feelings, my consent, and my opinion are worthless. "You decided you were going to do whatever you wanted and that I had to accept it." She tried to approach me again, but I backed away. "No, it's over. Move your things to the guest room. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." The next 3 months were a silent hell. Julia slowly moved her belongings, and the house became divided territory. I occupied the master bedroom and my office, she, the guest room and the children's bathroom. We walked the hallways like strangers, only speaking when absolutely necessary. On Monday morning, I filed the divorce petition. Andrea King submitted all the documentation, including the forged contract, financial records showing the unilateral spending, and notes where Julia made it clear she didn't care about my objections. That same day, I completely separated our finances. I called the bank, froze joint accounts, opened new accounts solely in my name, redirected my paychecks there, and changed all my passwords, email, bank, insurance, utilities, absolutely everything. I took out new credit cards linked only to my data. Andrea warned me that Julia would try to present herself as a victim. She will say she is an abandoned pregnant woman by a heartless husband, she explained. You need proof that what you are doing is defending yourself after she destroyed the marriage with her decisions. And she was right. Julia immediately started with that discourse. She told her family that I was leaving her pregnant, carefully omitting that the baby was not mine, that she acted without my permission, and that she forged legal documents. 2 days after I filed the lawsuit, Laura called me, furious. How can you do this to Julia? She is carrying my baby out of love. She is sacrificing her body to help me, and you abandon her. What kind of man does that? I'm happy for you, truly. I hope you have a healthy baby, and that everything turns out well. But she destroyed our marriage. She made decisions that broke it. That is her responsibility, not mine. You are insensitive. Julia needs support. The first trimester is really tough. Do you know what stress can cause during a pregnancy? Then you and David can support her. I'm done. We are doing it, but she needs her husband. Ethan, you took a vow. Do those promises mean nothing to you? They meant everything until she proved they had no value to her. Ask her about the forged signature. Ask her about all the decisions she made without her husband. I calmly ended the call, though I didn't feel completely calm. But with the conviction that I was not going back, she had crossed a line that was impossible for me to ignore. Still, I knew it wouldn't be the last attempt to reach out, and it wasn't. A few days later, David showed up at my house one Saturday afternoon, just as I was spending time with my children. He knocked on the door, and when I opened it, he was standing there with his hands in his pockets, nervous despite the air of firmness he tried to project. We need to talk, he said, trying to control the tremor in his voice. No, we don't have anything pending, I countered. He took a step forward, clearly determined to deliver a rehearsed speech. Julia is at her limit. Between the stress, the hormones, the pregnancy, and now not knowing where she'll live, she's falling apart. It's not good for the baby. I took a deep breath. I'll tell you again. It's not my baby, so it's not my concern. She made her decision behind my back. Now she must face what came with that choice. Are you really going to let your pride destroy your family? Your children need their mother and father together. I had to suppress a laugh. My pride? Seriously? Your wife asked mine to carry your child. Julia accepted without even mentioning it to me. Then she forged my signature on legal documents to force the process. And then you say the problem is my pride? David frowned, trying to justify the unjustifiable. She forged the signature because she knew you wouldn't be reasonable about this. So, in your logic, fraud is acceptable if you fear the other person will say no, I replied. What an argument. He was speechless, aware of how absurd what he had just said sounded. He swallowed, looked down, and added in a whisper, Please talk to her. She's falling apart. It's no longer my responsibility. You and Laura desperately sought this baby. Now you have it. Congratulations. David turned around and returned to his car without looking back, his shoulders slumped, unable to find another excuse. As the weeks passed, reality began to show its teeth. Julia was practically ruined. My salary had supported nearly 70% of our lifestyle for years, and her hygienist's salary was nowhere near covering the cost of maintaining a house, a car, food, utilities, and everything else. She always believed that no matter what she did, I would eventually give in, that I would continue to pay for everything, as always. She was wrong. On the other side, Laura and David weren't doing well financially either, though they had hidden it all this time. I found out through loose comments and logical deductions that their years of failed fertility treatments had completely devoured their savings. Credit cards were maxed out, loans from David's parents, huge medical expenses. They were barely surviving, much less able to sustain the pregnancy they themselves had requested. And then the inevitable came. The SOS messages. Julia began texting me from unknown numbers because I had already blocked her main one. Ethan, can you help me with the medical bills? Insurance doesn't cover everything. The kids need new school clothes. Could you send something? I'm living off credit cards. I don't even have money for food. Prenatal vitamins are so expensive. Please, I need help. I responded only once. You made a decision without me. Face the consequences. Knowing she would continue to insist, I blocked every number from which a new message appeared. Then I installed the co-parenting app that Andrea King, my lawyer, recommended. That app only allowed communications strictly related to the children, schedules, homework, doctor's appointments, school activities. No extra money, no personal matters, no emotional blackmail. Any message outside those parameters was automatically ignored. One night, while boxing up Julia's last abandoned items, books, decorations, utensils, Marcus came over to lend a hand. He picked up a box and silently began filling it with the decorative pillows she had insisted on buying to improve the living room's aesthetic. "How are you doing?" he finally asked. "Better than expected," I told him. "The house is calmer. It's a rest. The temporary custody agreement is working. The kids are adjusting." Sophia asked a couple of things at first, but now she understands that Mom and Dad live in different houses. Marcus carried a full box and took another. "And how are Laura and David doing with the dream family?" "From what I hear, quite poorly. Surrogacy costs more than they imagined. Between medical checkups, tests, supplements, ultrasounds, birth expenses, nothing is cheap. So, Julia was left alone with all the bills." That's right. She bet that her sister and David would take care of everything, and she also bet that I would end up accepting this chaos. She failed on all counts. Cold, perhaps. Unfair. Absolutely not. She destroyed our marriage with full awareness. I warned her countless times. She refused to listen. Now she faces what she provoked. With the pregnancy advancing, Julia sent ultrasounds through the app, believing they would move me. I didn't save them. I deleted them without thinking. Worse, she began using Sophia, our 5-year-old daughter, as a channel for guilt. During a visit, the girl told me, "Daddy, why don't you come back home? Mommy cries a lot." I knelt down to her level, gently holding her shoulders. "Sometimes adults make decisions that change things," I explained. "Mom made a decision I couldn't support. But I love you, Adam, and Jacob more than anything in this world. That will never change. None of this is your fault." Sophia seemed satisfied with the answer and went back to playing. By the 6th month of pregnancy, it was impossible to ignore that Julia was sinking. One Sunday afternoon, at the agreed-upon exchange location, a store parking lot halfway between us, I saw her get out of the car. She had deep, dark circles, a pale face, and an expression that mixed exhaustion, fear, and frustration. Laura was in the passenger seat. Apparently, they had ended up moving in together because neither could afford rent on her own. As I transferred the children's backpacks to my car, Julia spoke to me in a trembling voice. "Ethan, can we talk for just 5 minutes? If it's about the children, use the app. Nothing else." "I'm begging you," she said. "I made a mistake. I know, I'm 7 months pregnant. I don't have the strength, I don't have money, and I can't do this alone. Please, I need help." Laura got out of the car and stood between us defensively. "She's carrying my baby," she said indignantly. "The least you could do is have some compassion. Do you know how hard a pregnancy is? Nausea, exhaustion, doctor visits, pain." I looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and astonishment, almost laughing at the absurd audacity of demanding understanding after everything they had done. And right there, facing both of them, I understood something with absolute clarity. They still expected me to assume a role that was never mine. I am exactly where you asked me to be from the beginning, on the sidelines. You two insisted that the best thing was for me to disappear from the equation so that Julia could fully dedicate herself to supporting her sister. So, I did. I withdrew completely, without interfering in anything. And now, when you finally face the consequences of your decisions, you act surprised. Julia collapsed next to her car, using the door for support. Between sobs, she murmured, "I never wanted you to leave. I just wanted to help my sister. I thought that in time you would understand. I thought we could overcome this together." "Together?" I replied. "By lying, by forging documents, by getting pregnant by your sister's husband without my consent. If that is your idea of a team, we don't live in the same reality." Laura's face turned red with pure anger. "You are being cruel. Julia is 7 months pregnant. She's broke and scared, and you're standing here acting like she deserves to go through this." "She does deserve it," I answered without raising my voice. "Every part of this is a direct consequence of her own decisions. I warned her that it would destroy our marriage if she went ahead, and she still did. Now she lives with the result of her actions." I finished putting the children's backpacks in the trunk and helped Sophia and the twins into their seats. Julia was still crying. Laura watched me as if I were the villain of the whole story. I closed the car door, started the engine, and drove away, leaving both of them in the parking lot. The divorce proceedings progressed without a hitch. Andrea King, my lawyer, presented our case with almost surgical precision. The complete timeline of Julia's unilateral decisions, the forged signature, the marital expenses used without authorization, and her repeated refusal to listen to my concerns. Julia's lawyer opted for the sentimental strategy. Poor pregnant woman, abandoned by a heartless husband. Look at her suffer. He is insensitive. She is carrying her sister's baby out of love. And he is punishing her. Judge Sarah Wells was not manipulated. She had spent more than 2 decades seeing all kinds of divorce tactics, and this one did not impress her. She reviewed every document, listened to both parties, and posed questions that made Julia's lawyer pale. "Ms. Harper," the judge said, looking directly at Julia, "you made a unilateral decision that completely altered the nature of your marriage. Is that correct?" "I was only trying to help my sister," Julia stammered. "She has wanted to have a baby for years, and I thought—" "That was not what I asked. Did you consult with your husband before assuming this commitment?" Julia looked down. "No." "And you forged your husband's signature on a legal contract that financially obligated him?" Julia's lawyer immediately intervened. "Your Honor, my client was going through a very difficult emotional situation due to her sister's years of infertility." "Emotional distress does not justify committing fraud, counselor," the judge replied firmly. "Ms. Harper forged a signature, spent funds without permission, and acted with total disregard for her marriage. That does not resemble acting in good faith." The ruling was forceful. Divorce granted. We obtained primary physical custody of our 3 children. Julia would have supervised visits until she presented proof of stable housing and income. Furthermore, she was ordered to reimburse approximately $8,000 of marital funds illegally diverted to the surrogacy process. The judge also made it clear that I had no legal, financial, or parental responsibility whatsoever regarding the baby. It was not my child, and never would be. 3 weeks after the divorce was officially closed, at the end of December, Julia gave birth to a healthy baby girl weighing just over 7 pounds. She sent me a photo through the co-parenting app. The message read, "Beautiful girl. Laura and David are very happy. I thought you would like to know that everything went well." I marked the message as read and archived it without responding. I later learned what happened. Julia handed the baby over as agreed. Laura and David took her home with tears of relief. It seemed like the long-awaited happy ending after years of battling infertility, but reality quickly and brutally set in. A newborn involves expenses that no one anticipates until they are right there. Diapers, formula, multiple doctor visits, clothes that stop fitting in weeks. Laura couldn't work. David's hours were reduced due to cutbacks at his company. They had spent absolutely all their savings on the clinic, fees, exams, and professional costs, in addition to expenses related to Julia's pregnancy. There was nothing left for the baby. They began asking Julia for help, first with free childcare, then for money. But Julia was now working full-time trying to pay off debts and couldn't become an on-call nanny. She could barely support herself. The tension between the twins erupted. "You offered to be our surrogate. Now you won't even help us raise her," Laura angrily demanded. "She's your niece. You carried her for 9 months. How can you just walk away?" "I carried your baby for 9 months, as agreed," Julia replied. "I didn't agree to become your free childcare service. I have my own children, my own expenses, my own life." The relationship completely broke down. That inseparable bond between sisters disintegrated. Laura accused her of abandoning them after getting what she wanted, though no one could explain exactly what Julia was supposed to have gained. David stopped returning her calls. Meanwhile, Julia continued without money, without stability, and living with her mother in a small room, shared with our children on her weekend visits. The part-time hygienist job was not enough to cover her expenses. Credit cards were maxed out. Her marriage was destroyed, her credit ruined, her relationship with her sister in pieces, her children emotionally affected, all for an act of sacrifice that ended up hurting everyone. 6 months after the birth, when I had already achieved a certain emotional stability and was focused solely on my children, I received an unexpected message through the co-parenting app. The text was so extensive that the platform almost couldn't load it all at once. It mentioned no schedules, no logistics, nothing related to the children. It was a chaotic outpouring. "Ethan, I can't do this anymore," it began. "Everything is piling up on me. I'm alone. I have debts that keep growing, and the situation with Laura is irreparable. The children ask for you all the time, and I don't know how to handle all this. I know I failed. I know I should have done many things differently. I beg you, let's talk. We can rebuild what we had. We were good together. We still can be." I read the entire message, from beginning to end, without interruption. I felt no anger or satisfaction, only a quiet certainty. Julia was living the consequence of decisions she made deliberately. Even when I asked her not to go down that path, I responded only once, clearly, and without leaving room for future interpretations. "Your life took a turn when you decided to act without including me. I did what I had to do to protect our children and myself. That chapter is closed. Focus on fulfilling your responsibilities as a mother during your visits. I will not use this application for conversations that do not concern them." There were no reproaches, no sermons, no invitations to debate, just a final line that marked a definitive boundary. After sending the message, I closed the app and continued with my day. There were no further attempts on her part, and although I do not wish her ill, it is no longer my place to rescue her from the consequences she chose to ignore. My responsibility now is to my children and to the future I am building away from the chaos she created, and so ended any possibility of reconciliation, without drama, without scenes, simply with the acceptance that some decisions have no path back.